So we'll get started. So welcome everyone to today's presentation of I Have a Health Question, using online resources to find health information. Today's presentation is brought to you in partnership with the University of Illinois College of Medicine. Just so you know, this presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We will monitor the chat for questions, so if you have any questions, feel free to add them there, and time permitting, we will get to them at the end. Now, I extend a warm welcome to our presenter, Holly J. Hudson, Associate Professor and Regional Health Sciences Librarian at the University of Illinois Chicago Wofford College of Medicine campus. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Like Sally said, I am Holly Hudson. I'm an assistant professor and regional health sciences librarian at the University of Illinois Chicago. I'm actually based out in the Rockford at the Rockford campus here, so I'm not in Chicago super often, but that's kind of where I'm joining you from today. I have my master's in library and information science from the University of Washington. I got that in 2022, and then right after that, I moved out to UIC, and I've been here ever since. One note about today's presentation from me is that there's no way I can teach you everything you might possibly need to know about finding health information in, the 45 or 50 minutes we're going to have together today. This is more of an introduction and to help you guys help everyone kind of understand where you might find some information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be complete experts by the time we're done, although we can hope. As far as our objectives for today, my goal is to introduce you to the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. I also am hoping we can review various Know the Science tools that are run by the NCCIH. You'll be able to identify some sites with health information and utilize tools for evaluating that information and other information you find on the internet. As far as what we're going to be doing today, I really hope everybody's here to participate and is excited to work together with us. I also encourage us to keep confidentiality. I don't expect there to be really anything that comes up, but we are talking about health information and finding it, and sometimes people share their own stories. So take the learning with you, but keep anything confidential here with us today. And then, of course, we're here to learn today. I hope that you guys are going to take away stuff that you didn't know before. And that means there's no dumb questions and no shame to ask if you are struggling or can't find something. And like Sally said, we are going to be using the chat for questions, so feel free to drop them in the chat, and if possible, I'll answer on the way, but I'll definitely try to address them at the end. So what is the NCCIH? It's short for the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, and it is a division of the National Institutes of Health. It supports consumer understanding of complementary health approaches, so things like yoga or acupuncture or maybe taking herbal supplements. Uh, it also provides a lot of instructional and academic content, and it tries to be very accessible. So it's kind of designed for the layperson, not someone who is, a big heavy science, a doctor or a biochemist or something. They have a section on their site that we're actually going to explore in more detail shortly called Know the Science, and it gives some um, has some interactive ways to help you understand complicated topics around health science. And then they also have something called Health Topics A to Z, and we're actually going to go there now. You guys should be seeing the NCCIH screen. So they have something called Health Topics A to Z. And this Health Topics allows you to look up various treatments or complementary types of support and get a little overview of what they are actually doing. So for example, let's look at aromatherapy as an example today. So it kind of gives you an overview of what is aromatherapy. It gives you some information about how science works and how it would work in relation to this, and gives you some options for looking at PubMed for some additional support on this. Another one, if you looked at like, autism has been in the news quite a bit. It's going to give you some information about autism. This one, there's a lot more research that's been done about autism. So you get kind of some bottom line information, you get some information about safety, and then you get some options for references here for different studies that they cite. So this is just one of the ways you can utilize this NCCIH site. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to we're going to go back to the home page and we're going to move to the Know the Science. So there are some various tools here that the Know the Science tools that NCCIH provides, and they're all free. And I like to point out a couple of them that I think are really helpful. One here that we're not going to explore today is how to make sense of a scientific journal article. So if you're somebody who really likes to, you're like, know your sources or cite your sources, this can really help you understand how to read scientific journals in a way that's not so overwhelming, and you can kind of pick out the best parts of the journal or the article to understand it, even if you don't have a science heavy background. Another one that I think is really interesting is this one that talks about how natural doesn't necessarily mean safer or better. It kind of goes into the information that why a company might choose to put natural on their products and what that actually means, as opposed to leaving it off or using a different word choice to market their product. So like I said, there's several on here. You can feel free to explore this afterwards. The slides will be available. But for right now, we're going to go to the finding and evaluating online resources on complementary health approaches. So I'm not going to sit here and we're not going to necessarily go through every single step of every single one of these today. But I did want to kind of show you how this works, and how kind of what they do with these sites before we move on to some of the other content for today. First off, they give you kind of an introduction and you have a bunch of different modules to work through here. They talk about how do you know information is accurate, how is it current, lots of good stuff here to go through and to read through. They also have some specific information on finding stuff on social media, and how do people find information on social media? How do you know if it's accurate? And then they have some questions you can ask. And we're going to go into some additional stuff around assessing the information you find online towards the end of our session today. So I'm not going to go into great detail about this. One of the other ones that I think is very interesting is finding that health information on mobile apps. And I like to talk about this one because a lot of us download apps onto our phone and we don't always think about everything that the app is collecting, or a lot of apps will ask us to enter in information about ourselves and our health information. And so a couple of things to keep in mind when using an app on your phone that's gathering your health information. First, you want to think about what that app is going to do with that information. Is it going to try to market you something? Is it doing research on you? What's happening with the information you've got there? Another thing that you want to think about with this is what are the privacy standards that the app has developed? Apps that are commercially available, they are not generally subject to HIPAA rules. And so that means that if you're freely inputting your health information in there, they only have to abide by whatever their privacy policy says, not what things like a hospital or a clinic or a doctor might have to abide by. So it's just something to really think about here when you decide to put health information into an app. You really want to make sure you understand what they're going to do with it and how they're protecting your privacy. The final thing that I like to make sure I point out here is how does the app handle it if you don't want to share your information with them anymore? How do they scrub your data? How do they get rid of your account? Do they keep your data after you have input it in? So just all of these are things to think about, especially if you're using apps for fitness or health and wellness or to track a condition. Those are all, things like Fitbit or Apple Health or things like that. Those are all examples of apps where we might input our health information, and it's not always super clear what they're going to do with it or how they're going to use it. The final section here that we're going to talk about this a little more later on. So I do want to, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but it does talk to you about how to identify a fake news site. And so there are some very specific triggers to look for when you're on a site that's talking about some sort of health revolutionary breakthrough, right? You want to look for product endorsements. If a site is saying something like, this is the best product ever, or this is going to cure XYZ disease, that generally means that it's an advertising site. Real news organizations like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, they generally are not going to endorse a product, and it's a pretty big deal if they are actually saying something like that. And it would be um, very evident that that's not their normal practice. Um, you also want to look for things where it's got like a shocking or unbelievable sounding headline. If something comes up and says, this is going to cure diabetes. Well, diabetes, if something was able to cure, if there was a pill that could cure diabetes, we would all be hearing about it. It would not be, it was kind of some random site on the internet that's announcing it. It would be in all the newspapers, and we'd be hearing quite a bit about it. Um, this kind of goes along with this unbelievable sounding headline, if it presents research findings that seem too good to be true. If there was a cure for cancer, for all cancers, or if there was, something else going on, that type of research would be in the national headlines, and we would be hearing quite a bit about it. It's, if it's only one place that's got it and we're not hearing about it regularly, you're going to want to doubt that. You're going to want to do a lot more verification. Couple other things here. If it only quotes people who say good things about the product, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm on like Amazon or something along those lines, I'm always looking down in like the product reviews to be like, hey, did this dress fit? Or like, what does this, is this pasta, does it hold its shape the whole way? Or, whatever the thing might be. And if you only see really good things about medication or a treatment, that's definitely a red flag. Um, if it contains links to sales sites, so again, that one is a little bit harder because a lot of even legitimate organizations do now have advertising. Sometimes they'll have advertising kind of up on the top of the screen or along the sides of the screen, the sidebars. So that one's doesn't necessarily knock it off the list for me, but it is something to watch for, because that those folks, if they allow ads, they're taking advertising revenue. And so you want to take whatever they're saying with maybe a bit of a grain of salt, because depending on who their advertisers are, it could influence the decisions they're making about what products they're endorsing, or what they are providing to consumers. So finally, this one also kind of goes along with the quoting people who say good things. It's that the reader comments or the user comments, and you can't add your own comment. So there's no way for the everyday person to add a comment onto a product review. So those are some of the kind of the ways these tools work. They give you some modules to work through. They give you a lot of information to parse through on your own. And like I said, we're not going to go through step by step with all of these, but there were some of those pieces I wanted to make sure we talked about before we move on with the presentation. And I'm going to pop the link for this in the chat. So it will be available to you, and it's also the NCCIH site is going to be in the presentation as well. Okay, so let's move back here to our PowerPoint. Okay. So once we've talked a little bit about that NCCIH site, and they talk about trying to, how do you know where you are when you're on a site that's got health information, if it's got reliable health information or not. And I wanted to give you guys a few sites that you could get reliable health information from, and that you'd be able to connect to some evidence-based, health information. So this first one is called Medline Plus. It is a free online health resource that's provided by the National Library of Medicine. The National Library of Medicine is also under the National Institutes of Health, just like NCCIH. I'll put the link for them in the chat here. Oops. But they cover a wide range of topics. They have all kinds of health information topics, everything from asthma all the way to Parkinson's. They cover pretty much every major disease that's out there. And kind of like NCCIH, they have this health topics button that has like the A to Z links. They also separate out their health topics by body locations, disorders, demographic groups, and then they have the diagnosis and therapy and the health and wellness. So they also have just a straight up search box up here if you know the name of a disease and you want to search for it. So we could take like blood, heart, and circulation, for example. And then we could say, hey, let's look up aneurysms. So when you kind of move on to a page that has a specific health condition, it's going to give you a bit of a summary here. That'll be kind of the first thing you get. And then it will talk a little bit about what is an aneurysm. It'll talk about some of the diagnosis and tests you might get, the treatments and therapies, related issues, if there's any clinical trials that are happening. It'll give you some journal articles to read through that are freely available to the public. And then you can get a little bit more information about kind of aneurysms and some of the stuff that goes along with that. If there's an expert organization or institution that handles this disease, they'll add it here. So like for aneurysms, we have National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which makes sense, right? Because aneurysms affect those areas of the body. And it can really give you a great overview. So aneurysms is one example. Another one, let's actually do myocardial infarction, which is a fancy word for heart attack. So if you go here and we go to heart attack, you're going to get that same summary page, but you also get some information, again, about those diagnoses and tests. And I really like that because this can be useful if you have never had a heart attack before, or if you're worried about it or about what they might do for testing. It will give you can go in and read exactly what they're going to do in those tests. It also gives you some things around living with it, and then some specifics that you can test your knowledge around. So that's a little bit about Medline Plus, about their health topics. They also have an option for drug and health supplements, genetics, and a section here specifically for medical tests. So if you're going to have a specific test, maybe it's associated with several different conditions, but if they tell you the name of the test, you can go in and search for it, and it will give you like a step-by-step instruction of exactly what they're going to do and what you can expect. And that one, to me, I'm always really grateful for something like that, because sometimes it can be scary to go to the doctor and they're gonna do some sort of testing on you. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know what to expect. And it's nerve-wracking to be sitting there in that little thin hospital gown and kind of, just waiting for whatever the doctor's going to do next. If you kind of know what's going to happen, you can feel a lot more in control of that and be able to prepare yourself, whatever it might be. A couple of other things about Medline Plus that I should note is that they really try to make it easy to read. It should be something that's simple and clear cut. They also have, I think they've got it on here. Let me see if I can find an example of it. Um, sometimes they have things that they call them like, oh, right here is a good example, easy to read. So if it's got this easy to read designation, it is designed to be very, very simple to read, simple to understand. They are not going to use any technical mumbo jumbo on it. It is designed for the average everyday person to be able to take it in and read through it. Another option, which you probably will have been seeing throughout this, as I've been kind of demoing uh, Medline Plus, is that they have a lot of Spanish content. They've got a couple of other languages as well, but this actually whole site can be turned into Spanish. You just click the Espanol button here and it will move the whole site into Spanish, which I think can be fantastic if you are someone who is not like English is not your first language, or if you have friends and family who have English as not their first language. This can be so useful to actually have resources in the person's primary language as opposed to trying to have to translate it. So that is Medline Plus. The second one I wanted to talk about is called DailyMed. Now, DailyMed is a little more convoluted. It's also run by the National Library of Medicine, part of the NIH. And I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. But this one will tell you it's all about drugs, all about prescription, all about your prescription drugs. So you can enter a drug name or code here and it will pull it up. I'm gonna do metformin which is a common drug to help treat diabetes. And it will show you the packaging for the drug as well as all of the drug label information, all the boxed warnings. You can also go to PubMed and it will show you any places where it'll show you papers and journal articles that discuss things like the clinical trials that they used or the therapeutic use, or if there's adverse effects, you can search, like just click into PubMed and search, and it will bring up various scientific journal articles that deal with that particular topic. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they will try to give you pictures of the labels or of the packaging of the drug so that you can make sure that what you've got is what you're supposed to have. You can also double check like the boxed warnings, the FDA recalls. And then one of the things that I always think is really interesting are the adverse reactions. And I think, a lot of times, if you're just on one or two drugs, it's okay, right? Usually you're not going to have to worry about adverse reactions or having a lot of symptoms or issues. But if you're on lots of different drugs, sometimes knowing or being able to look up what the adverse reactions are, if it's put with something else, or if it's, what the common side effects are. I really like this site because it allows you to do that, and you can easily look it up and see what's been studied and what's been uncovered about this particular drug. So again, it's with the NIH, so you can expect it to not have any advertising. You can expect it to have a lot of links to various scientific or evidence-based studies and information. It does they do their best to provide information about all prescription drugs that are FDA approved. However, there's lots of stuff that's not FDA approved that does not make it onto this site. So they do try to do some. They'll try to do some medical devices, some dietary supplements, not all by a long shot. Sometimes medical foods or cosmetics. But again, if especially if the cosmetics are, if you're ordering a cosmetic that's been made overseas or something like that, it just doesn't all, they can't do everything. But they do their best. And like I said, they try to give the drug labels and the inserts and then the safety guidelines for everything. The last site that I just wanted to take you guys to show you that I think is an interesting way to find out information about health stuff that's going on in your area is clinicaltrials.gov. This is an online database of clinical research studies that are happening in your area and information about the results. So I will pop this in to clinical trials. It does give us a notification here that, because it's a government website, right? So they have to cover cover all their tracks. But it does let us know that, hey, the government does not review or approve the safety and science of all the studies listed on this website. This is for informative purposes. But let's pick a disease, let's say stroke. And let's say that we're looking to, we just want to see what types of studies on strokes are happening in our area. So if I just with that alone, there's been a lot of studies on strokes. There's lots of filters I could use here to kind of limit or filter this out. I could look specifically for clinical trials that are actually recruiting if I was interested in participating in a study on strokes. But they give you a lot of information here. So this one is on telerehabilitation early after a stroke. So if somebody had had a stroke, the study is trying to find out if telerehabilitation can work if they do it early after a stroke patient goes home from the hospital. And for something like that, maybe this might be an interesting study to look at to see what they're going to do. You can find out a little bit about the summary about what the trial's actually attempting to do, what their aims are. And they also give you some additional information by, we just looked at Medline Plus to learn more about the topic, and then you can go in to see what the eligibility criteria were if you were interested in participating in this type of a study. And you can do that with pretty much any medical condition or disease here. You can look it up to see what is available. A, if there's a clinical trial near you, and B, so I had looked at ones that were recruiting, but I could go in and look at the ones that were completed, and I can also see if they have, what type of results they have. So let's look at this one. You can go in and look at if they have any results. So they didn't post anything on this study, but we could find out a little bit more because that was 2023, so they may not be done. It was November of 23, and I know that's like almost 2 years ago, but it's not that long. In researcher parlance, they may not be done writing their paper yet. So, but you can find out a little bit more about it, and you could always they have the author contact for the person who, sorry, I don't know where it's at on here, but they do have an author contact for the person who's doing this trial. So if you were really interested, you could always reach out to them and ask them a little bit more about their trial and what happened in it. So that kind of goes over a little bit of some of the places you can find find medical information or health information. Does anybody have any questions about any of the sites that we looked at today, or anything that you'd like to know about with that? I'm seeing none, so we're going to move on. One more place that I always, I always, since we're doing this as part of the College of Medicine and I'm part of the, the university library system at the UIC, I always like to provide our information here. Up in Rockford, if any of you ever get up this way, we do have a community health print collection that is really robust. Lots of information about health and health conditions that are written with lay people in mind, not just medical students. Um, our location here does have uh a several public computers that are available for anybody to use, so that you are able to utilize our resources, our databases, and you can utilize our online journal collection, as well as our database collection. And then we also have a couple of guides here, on consumer health and complementary and alternative medicines that are freely available for the public to use. There's also a couple of sites I didn't, when I did this, I kind of put together like my PowerPoint and everything for this in September. And I will say, I've talked a lot about NIH or, National Library of Medicine or all these sites that I showed you. They're all government run. And right now we're currently in the middle of a government shutdown. And we also, I think we can, there's been a lot of changes to government funding and government support of health and science types of research lately. There's just been lots of changes around that. So in response to some of those changes, there have been some pretty recent developments of different public health sites to watch, that also will be providing health information. So I put a couple of them on here that would be interesting. That I think are interesting to kind of keep an eye on. One of them is the West Coast Health Alliance, and that was started in fall of 2025, and it's by just kind of the West Coast states. And they are really looking at specifically for immunization recommendations. And then it also sounds like they have some additional health information that they may be posting out. And it's kind of similar to the Northeast Public Health Collaborative, which was started in fall of 25, and that was by 7 northeastern states plus New York City. They have similar aims, and they just did it was like last week or maybe the week before, for it was like the Governor's Health Alliance that Illinois is going to be participating in. I believe that was 15 different state governors have gotten together to kind of put together health recommendations and aims within their own state health departments. So a couple other interesting organizations that you might think about looking through if you're looking for health information are the World Health Organization. They provide information on various health topics, but they have a lot more global focus, and they really look at disease and those types of things more broadly. So, depending on what your interest is, that's going to just kind of depend on if that organization is really going to work well for you or not. The American Academy of Pediatrics is another one that I think is really interesting. Again, that immunization recommendations, but they also have quite a bit of additional consumer health information around children. So if you've got kids at home or grandkids or, special little people in your life, the AAP may be a good place to look for information for them. Jacqueline, I see your question in the chat, which is which sites point to a discussion group that you can attend online or in person, regarding a specific health problem. And I would say the best bet for something like that, because it's always going to depend on the health condition, right? Like there's not really a it'd be cool if there was, but there's not really a database that lists like the various support groups that are available through online support groups. My recommendation would be to go to that disease's homepage. So for example, let's say diabetes, right? You'd go to a reputable national site for diabetes. I want to say it's like it might be oh gosh, I'd have to go find it. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what that one would be right now, but um I would go to the national site for that and see if they have like information for consumers or if they have some sort of option for a health problem or a support group for it. You might also check those groups like their social media pages, like Facebook or Instagram or X. All of those might have spaces where they meet with other folks who have that same disease or have links to groups that provide that type of service and support. I know that's not like the greatest answer, but that's about as good as I've got right now for discussion groups or support groups for specific health problems. I hope that helps. Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to find support groups sometimes, especially if the disease isn't well researched or well studied. Um, so yeah, but a lot of times if you go to like the actual whatever site is kind of like the national site for that specific disease, they will have some recommendations or you can find something that way. All right. So, now we're going to kind of switch gears. Now that we've talked about some various sites that you can find health information or look for health information, um, we want to think about verifying it. Again, we've had lots of changes. And there's just in general, there's a lot of misinformation about health online. There's lots of, maybe somebody's not on purpose misleading you, but maybe their information is outdated or inaccurate. And it's really important that no matter where it comes from, even if it comes from a government website, even if it comes from, your mom or whoever the person might be. It's really important that we verify that information, that it's actually accurate and that we've done our own due diligence, right? We're the kind of last bastion of our own health preservation. So it's we have to be responsible consumers of that information. So some of the biggest things that can happen is that scientific information can change pretty rapidly. We have scientific discoveries and we have changing geo-social and political scenes as we can see, kind of happening in front of us. We add AI, artificial intelligence, especially the generative artificial intelligence, with that uses things like large language models to create new information. All of those factors are really can play havoc with the information scene that's there. Um, and so it's going to be really important for us to think about where did this information come from and how did it get to me? A couple of the things that we want to remember as we start thinking about verification and like how do we look? How do we find out more? Before we just say, yes, this is true, or no, it's not. You want to think about evaluation on a continuum. Information isn't always going to fall into this nice little box of, yes, I know this is true, or no, I absolutely know it is not. Most of the time, like if you're using a tool or something to kind of help you evaluate information, some of the answers are going to be yes and some of them are going to be no, and you have to decide how far along the yes or no columns you want the information to go before you say yes, I'm going to believe this, or no, this is not true. You also want to think about practicing common sense evaluation. Going all the way back to the beginning of our webinar, it's going to be important to think about some of those stop signs that NCCIH had identified. Is it too good to be true? Is it, do they had advertising? What type of what type of reviews are there? So that's going to be important to think about. And then sometimes utilizing tools can help. And the last kind of piece of our session today is got a couple of tools here for supporting you to evaluate information. So the first one I'm going to talk about, and again, I'll drop all the links in the chat, This is called the SIFT method. And so it stands for stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace the claims. Um, and the biggest thing that you want to do here, that SIFT really tries to do, is that idea of stopping and like pausing for a minute. Because a lot of times with misinformation or information that's not good, especially health information, they're trying to get you to have some sort of emotional reaction, right? They are trying to pull on your heartstrings or get you excited about something. Because, we all know having a chronic condition or a condition that's going to lead to tough outcomes, that is an emotional thing and that's hard for us. So SIFT is really encouraging us to stop before we get too excited and take a step back and start kind of thinking about the emotions that whatever this product is trying to generate in us. The next thing that it wants you to do is think about is about investigating the source. And this is particularly important if you plan to share the information with others or with a loved one. We want to know a little bit more about it before you send the email or hit the share button or, like it or comment on it. Uh, who's the author? And where did they get their information? I always use this example of if I'm having a heart attack, I'd really like to talk to a cardiologist, not a podiatrist. Both of them are doctors, but the podiatrist probably isn't really qualified to actually help me or understand what I'm going through with my heart attack. Same thing if I had a broken ankle. I don't need a cardiologist to look at my ankle. I need a podiatrist. And so you want to make sure that even if the author says they're a doctor or they're a medical professional, where is their expertise? What do they do? And what type of treatments do they give you? If they're a doctor in physical therapy, I don't want them performing brain surgery. Um, so another thing to think about with this too is what type of mission do they have? What do they get out of this? Is this a scientific article? Is this getting published in a reputable journal? Is it a blog post on a website? Do they have advertising to it? Um, who's funding them? Where's the money coming from for this publication to be created and sent out to us? So it's something that we want to investigate that source and really think about the author and even the website creator too. Like, what are they getting out of this? And what are their credentials? How do they know? Next, the next stop here is to finding better coverage. And I don't necessarily like finding better coverage, but I do think finding additional coverage might be a better way to think about this. Does this come up somewhere else? Can you find information about this topic in another place? Is it on sites? Is it being covered by news sites that you trust or national news organizations, right? Most of the time, if it's a big discovery, it will be in all of the news outlets, not just one that's kind of off over here in Netherland. The links here, they give you some option for that Snoops or the Washington Post fact checker or factcheck.com. So there are some places here to help you learn a little more about the topic or check to see if a claim that a paper or a blog or an advertisement is making is factual. And then finally, we want to think about tracing those claims or quotes, or even the media piece, right? Even if it's an image or a video of someone saying something, we want to think about moving that back to their original context. Where did those actually come from, and who said it, and when did they say it, and where were they when they said it? So all those things matter when we start thinking about that information. So that's one of the methods that we have, the SIFT method. Another option for everybody is something called Trust It or Trash It. And Trust It or Trash It is a little less, I'll pop this in the chat. It is a little less emphasizing on kind of stopping and assessing emotions. They have a little more uh, kind of line by line of, who authored the content, who said it, when did they say it, and how did they know? And I do think that one is an interesting piece in Trust It or Trash It, is how did they know? Because again, we think about that podiatrist versus cardiologist. Like, I want to, how do you know what you're saying is real? Um, and the way they talk about this is, um, is it something that if you can't answer the questions here with like, here's how they know, or if you have to say, I don't know, then you want to think about maybe trashing it as opposed to trusting it. But I do like that they say think about it because, right, we know it's on a continuum. It's not always going to be like black or white. It's gonna kind of follow, it may lean a little heavier this way or lean a little heavier that way, and we have to make that decision of what's going to be best for us. So that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation. I see Audrey. Perfect. Audrey put a question in the chat to ask if we'll get a copy of the recording. It's going to be uploaded to the library's YouTube page in the next, I don't know, week or so. And if you're interested in the slides, you can ask for those, and I'm happy to send them to you. My email, I'll pop that in the chat here, is H Hudson's just my first initial last name at uic.edu. And I'm always happy to answer questions or help you develop, if you're trying to search for something and you can't find the information, I'm always happy to help try to locate that type of stuff. So an email is usually the best way to get in touch with me. But does anybody have any questions? We have about 10 minutes. Well, if nobody has questions, um, yeah, absolutely, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for coming. If nobody's got any questions, then I will just sign us off today. I thank you all for coming and for the presentation. I don't know, Sally, if there's anything else we need from the library.
No, thank you, Holly. That was very informative presentation. Yeah, so we'll be uploading this recording up to in the library's YouTube page, and I'll include a link right here. So it should be coming in the next couple of days, and right there. So you'll be able to see the presentation from the YouTube in the next couple of days. Thank you. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a great day.